Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk to this highly sophisticated and enlightened crowd. So I have to watch out when the question time comes. Let me start by giving you some background. Everybody knows that Iraq is the cradle of civilization. It's like a cliche people use. I want to put some flesh on this cliche, bring it to life, as it were, to give you a sense of the depth of history that we Iraqis are aware of. In Mesopotamia, the old name for Iraq, was the first settled human civilization on record. There were so many firsts that were developed in Iraq that will probably astound you. It is agreed generally that the wheel was invented in Iraq. Writing was invented in Iraq. Beer was first brewed in Iraq, for those who like beer. The first ever library, the first ever organized school, the first ever laws were written in Iraq, promulgated and written in Iraq. And yes, even the first two-chamber democracy. This will surprise you because many people, even in this century, in the last decade, when the Americans went into Iraq to bring us democracy, people were saying, well, what do these people know about democracy? We have very, very deep roots in civilization. And just to throw in one more item, the concept of a week as a unit of time, which is totally arbitrary if you think about it. It's not based, I mean, the month is based on the lunar cycle. The year is, of course, on the seasons. But the week is an arbitrary unit. And it was a Sumerian invention, which then percolated into the religions. And we have it as, we are hardly aware where it comes from. But for your information, it comes from Iraq, and the division of the day into 24 hours and the hour into 60 minutes. The Sumerians and then the Babylonians used the base of 60 for calculation, and that's where the 60 minutes and 60 seconds come from. Now, that's enough to give you a hint of what my country has contributed to human civilization, things that we take for granted every day of our lives. But let's bring it back to nearer to more recent history. The city into which both the professor and myself were born in was actually a very different place from the city it has become now. If you go to Baghdad now, when I go back to Baghdad, after 26 years of exile, I went back to my city, Baghdad. I could hardly recognize it. It was totally ruined. When I was brought up in a middle class in Baghdad, it was a tranquil city where crime was very low, corruption was almost unheard of, families were taking care of their kids and their education, tending their gardens, caring for their neighbors. There was hardly any violence, and sectarian talk was shunned and frowned upon and was not considered acceptable. I grew up in that kind of environment. The country was doing quite well. The modern state of Iraq was formed early in the 20th century, and by the time I was a teenager, I did well at school, high school, and the government sent me to the United Kingdom to study at the government expense because I won a scholarship. Then Iraq took the wrong turning. In 1958, a coup d'etat deposed the monarchy, deposed the then quite clear democratic system, and the military started to govern in Iraq. And that precipitated a slide in Iraq's fortune. By 1979, after the Ba'athists came to power in 1968, at 1979, when Saddam Hussein, a familiar name I take it, took absolute power, Iraq's fate was sealed, and the decline accelerated. And to give you a comparison between the Iraq that the Ba'athists took over and the Iraq that the Ba'athists had to relinquish when the Americans came in, let me just quote a few numbers. When the Ba'athists took over, Iraq had a very strong currency and a thriving economy. The GDP of Iraq was equivalent to that of Spain. Not bad. The foreign currency reserves were in the region of $35 billion. A tidy sum at that time. Nowadays, $35 billion doesn't take you very far. But at that time, it was a considerable sum of money. When Saddam relinquished power, when the Americans came into Iraq, the economy was in total ruins, and instead of having foreign reserves, we were in the red to the tune of more than $350 billion. The Iraqi dinar at the beginning was worth 3.33 American dollars. When Saddam was removed, the American dollar was equal to more than 3,000 Iraqi dinars. Okay. So this factor of 1 to 10,000 demonstrates the level of collapse. But the collapse was not only in the economy, it was in every indicator in the country, social, economic, and political. Iraq had been driven almost back into the Middle Ages.